Hello and welcome to another episode of All Fired Up with Brandon Ramsey. We are here live at about 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday evening, November 5th. Obviously, we are now a couple of days into the college basketball season and already plenty to talk about, and obviously plenty still to talk about for the coming 2025-2026 season. That's what we will be doing here today on our episode of All Fired Up. But as always, please make sure you dive on into the comment section. This is a live video, and we want to make sure that we interact with everybody throughout the show. So please dive in with any comments or questions throughout today's episode. Also, make sure you do like this video if you're watching on YouTube and subscribe to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show YouTube channel. And then over on Twitter, and make sure you're following me at BRamseyKSR. Now, diving into what we've seen the last 48 hours or so since the college basketball season began. Obviously, us sickos, we were up at 8 a.m. to watch Queens and Winthrop in the Field of 68 opening day marathon, which was awesome. Brought us several really, really good games. We're going to talk a little bit about High Point probably later on in the show, but it was an excellent opening day. I believe 169 games on that day, culminating with a doubleheader on TNT with Arizona defeating Florida and then BYU holding on to defeat to defeat Villanova. Perfect segue into one of the first things I wanted to talk about. Man, these freshmen are just living up to the hype that we expected in the 2025-2026 season. These guys are probably surpassing it now through these first couple of days of the college basketball season. You know, it was all Darius, or it was all Carlos Boozer. It was all Darren Peterson. It was all AJ Dibansa leading up to the year as sort of the big three that we all were excited to watch. However, quickly on Monday night, Koa Pete stole the show, finished with 30 points, I believe, 7 rebounds, 5 assists as well, against what was supposed to be, and what arguably obviously still is, the best front court in college basketball, the reigning national champion Florida Gators. Koa Pete was the most physical guy on the floor. He was one of the most athletic guys on the floor. He was one of the most skilled guys on the floor, certainly when focusing on the front court. He was absolutely outstanding in that kind of first showcase game of this college basketball season. Koa Pete certainly exceeded his personal expectations on that first night. Darius Acuff and Malik Thomas at Arkansas also each had 20-point games in their opener for the Arkansas Razorbacks, two guys that are going to be, in that next class of elite freshmen that play for Coach John Calipari. Nate Ament had a solid game for Tennessee. He's a guy that's obviously going to be one of their best players throughout the season. Mikael Brown Jr. Got off to a good start for Louisville, who won by 1,000,000 points against South Carolina State. I believe he's obviously another guy that's going to be one of the best players on his team. We mentioned Koa Pete, but Braden Burries didn't have the best game for Arizona on Monday night, but he's certainly a guy that has very high expectations for Arizona as well. And then let's get to those big three. Just last night, we saw Cameron Boozer and Caden Boozer make their debuts for Duke as the Blue Devils took on Texas in the Dick Vitale Invitational there in Charlotte. Duke was actually down 1 point at halftime, and Cameron Boozer had not scored, which we probably could have made a lot of money betting on that, because I don't think anybody saw that coming. It was 0 of 7 at the half. But then, as Cameron Boozer does, not only did Duke win the game, but he finished with 15 points and 13 rebounds in what turned into a pretty impressive performance for the superstar Duke freshman. Darren Peterson had 21 points in his opener for the Kansas Jayhawks. And then, sorry, I want to fix this real quick. 21 points for Darren Peterson in it for the Kansas Jayhawks. And then AJ Dibansa. I believe he had 20 or 21 points as well. Handful of assists. I thought he was just kind of methodically very, very good for BYU in their win over Villanova. So those freshmen, man, I mean, expectations could not have been higher really for them going into this season, and in their respective openers, I'm not sure they could have done much more to, like I said, not only live up to these super high expectations, but even surpass them in many ways. Since I did not have any other preview podcast out, obviously you can go check out my college basketball manifesto on KentuckySportsRadio.com. That's kind of my big preview content of the year that lives on the KSR website. But quickly, my Final Four, which I feel pretty good about now after some respective opening nights. But I had Arizona, Duke, Houston, and UConn in my Final Four, with Houston defeating Duke for the national championship. Arizona is kind of the one that's maybe most out on the limb just based on the AP preseason polls. They were 13th, but obviously with what they did against Florida on opening night, how good Jaden Bradley was. We already talked about Koa Pete. They certainly look like a Final Four contender so far. And you know, when you sort of run through who are the teams in the preseason that can win a national championship, certainly those four that I already mentioned. You obviously would have Purdue in that conversation as well. I think that the Kentucky Wildcats are in that conversation. You know, maybe even a team like Michigan, like Louisville, Texas Tech. They certainly looked good with what they got on opening night last night without JT Toppin from Christian Anderson. But you know, just I think a pretty deep pool of talent at the top of college basketball this season. But diving conference by conference, I have Duke winning the ACC this year. I think it's I know Louisville has very high expectations. You're going to hear something certainly from you know teams like NC State, who I like a lot this year with Coach Will Wade. I think Virginia is going to be much improved. Clemson still going to have something to say for that. But give me the Boozers, give me Isaiah Evans, all those guys. Caleb Foster coming back as well. Patrick Nabonga, I think he's going to have a really big season. He's a guy I loved in high school. So I do have Duke winning the ACC, but like I said, I have NC State and Virginia are two teams I kind of want to keep an eye on throughout this season. Arbus Wiggs 4810 the comments has a comment about Kentucky. I'll talk a little bit about Kentucky later on in the show, so I'll get to that comment just in a little bit. Big 12, I have Houston winning that league, obviously in the Final Four as well. Already talked about Arizona. I like Texas Tech a lot. Obviously, we saw how good the guard play can be without JT Toppin on opening night. I still worry about all of those transfers coming up from the mid-major ranks and transitioning to really be at the top of the Big 12 this year. So I have some questions, honestly, about Texas Tech. Kansas, I love Florida Badunga in his second year in Lawrence. Certainly what Darren Peterson can bring to them is maybe one of the top scorers in all of college basketball. But what Houston's done winning this league by multiple games each of the last couple of years, I do think this is the year that Coach Kelvin Sampson elevates it even a step further. The UConn Huskies, who won the championship in 23 and 24, to come back and win the Big East this year. I think Providence and Creighton are some teams to watch out for there, but I certainly like the Huskies to win it. In the Big Ten, I have Purdue. I know that my Kentucky Wildcats put it to them a little bit in an exhibition game. I still think they're one of the best teams in the country. You can pretty much set your watch to what you're going to get from Braden Smith, Fletcher Lawyer, and Trey Kaufman-Renn. I like CJ Cox. I think they're Oscar Clough is going to be better than what we saw in exhibition season. He's still going to be one of the better rebounders in college basketball. Omer Mayer is going to be an excellent piece for them. Jack Benner played well, the redshirt freshman for the Boilermakers in their win last night against Evansville. Still think Purdue has the horses to take care of business in the Big Ten. But I'm really high on Oregon this year as well. I think their guard play is going to be excellent. What they bring back with some guys in the front court as well. I'm really high on UCLA actually as well. I think that, to me, you know you're going to get a good defensive team when Mick Cronin is your coach. Then adding in Donovan Dent, I'll talk a little bit even more here in a second. I think he's one of the best players in college basketball this season. This is going to be the best offense the Bruins have had under Coach Cronin, and I think they're going to be really good. Ohio State is a team I would watch out for a little bit as well. SEC, legitimately probably the toughest pick because, you know, for a lot of reasons I want to pick Kentucky. And I think Kentucky is going to be very good and compete at the very top of this league. And you still have to deal with Alabama. You still have to deal with Tennessee, I think, this year, a team I'm probably higher on than some others. Mississippi State, I love Josh Hubbard. I think he's going to be an All-American type player this year. Bucky Ball coming over to Texas A&M. But give me the Florida Gators. To me, and I talked about this on TikTok, which you can follow me at BRamseyKSR there as well. For all the hot takes coming out of opening night on Monday with how good how good Arizona looked, and man, yeah, this is a Final Four team. This is a national championship contender. Arizona, Arizona, Arizona. To me, there was no reason to jump ship from Florida either. The defending national champs, they still have arguably the best front court in college basketball. I thought Thomas Hawk was amazing in that game, scoring 27 points for the Gators. I thought that you saw that front court can fit together with three of those guys playing at a time. And then we all knew the backcourt wasn't going to be the same. Like, I like Boogie Fland a lot. I like Xavier Lee a lot. They were never going to be able to produce at the level of all four of Walter Clayton Jr. and Will Richards and Elijah Martin and Denzel Aberdeen, who's now at Kentucky. That was never even really supposed to be part of the equation. I and some others that liked Florida still just thought that, hey, you bring back the best front court in the country. And I don't know if you could have done a much better job of filling in the guard spots than landing Xavier Lee and Boogie Fland. Are they going to be as good? No. Could they be good enough? I still think so. Those guys did not play very well on Monday night. And guess what? They had a chance to win it at the end of the game, honestly. If Boogie Fland makes that corner three after stealing the inbounds, they have a real chance to win that game. So I'm not by any means out on Florida. To me, if anything, they've solidified themselves as one of the top few teams in college basketball, even in a loss on Monday night. Some of the mid-majors worth watching this year. I wrote about Akron in the College Basketball Manifesto. I think that the coach John Gross has yet another NCAA tournament team with the Zips this year. A couple all MAC type guys on this team. I know Ohio's going to be good in that league. Watch for Akron, have a really special season. High Point, one of the teams we watched in the Field of 68 Classic. They are going to be excellent. If they can beat BYU in a week or so on the road, they are a team that legitimately is probably going to be favored in every game they play this year and could run the table through the regular season into the NCAA tournament. Winthrop picked up that impressive win over Queens on Monday morning. St. Bonaventure was impressive as well. Some really good guard play, some smaller guards for those teams. Murray State was impressive as well. But High Point, I think, is one that people need to go ahead and get their arms around and get to know. Because again, they're probably the team most likely to be undefeated for the longest period of time this year, if that's something you're interested in following. My preseason All-Americans, I have Cameron Boozer as the player of the year. Some of that, I watched him play a bunch in prep basketball. I've essentially never seen this guy lose a basketball game, even at the highest levels of EYBL, high school basketball, all these different things. I like what Duke brings back more than maybe some other people do. And I just think that they are going to have the type of season. Cameron Boozer's going to have the type of season, put up some ridiculous numbers. He will be the player of the year, beating out probably the other freshmen, Najad Advanza and Darren Peterson, who I think are both first-team All-Americans as well. And then I have Braden Smith and Donovan Dent as my other two first-team preseason All-Americans this season. Something else I wanted to talk about in today's show, just because I found it interesting when I was looking at some betting odds for the championship favorites this year. Obviously, that mirrors pretty closely the teams that I think have a chance to win the NCAA tournament, the teams that are highly ranked in KenPom or the preseason AP poll. And I was just looking at the coaches. It's like, man, that there are some really, really interesting storylines with some of the coaches that are competing for national championships this season. The first one I want to talk about, Coach Matt Painter at Purdue and Coach Kelvin Sampson at Houston. These guys are ranked number 1 and number 2 in the preseason, respectively. And what do they have in common? They've never won an NCAA tournament. Oddly enough, they are our last two runners-up, Purdue in 2024, and then obviously Houston last year in 2025. And in fact, Houston knocked out Purdue in Indianapolis in the Sweet 16 this past season as well. But those are two future Hall of Fame coaches, definitely two of the best coaches to not have a ring, and arguably the two coaches that on paper have the best chance to win and cut down the nets this season. So I think it's certainly an interesting storyline as those two pursue their first national championship this season. Similarly, at Duke and Kentucky, you have Coach John Shire and Coach Mark Pope, who are much younger into their careers. I've never won a championship either, but are now coaching at their alma mater that doubles as the bluest of blue bloods in all of college basketball. Those are places where winning a national championship immortalizes you forever among that fan base, among those programs. So I think that seeing if one of those guys can break through still early on in their coaching careers and win one at their alma mater, at a blue blood like Duke or Kentucky, that would certainly, that gets your name in the rafters at those sort of places. So something to follow for those as well. Kind of on the other side of this coin, you have Todd Golden and Dan Hurley, who are looking to sort of build themselves a dynasty relatively early on in their career. If Todd Golden were to win back-to-back national championships, not only does that put him in very, very rarefied air, he would actually beat Billy Donovan to the punch. Billy Donovan was 42 years old when he went back to back in 06 and 07 at Florida. Todd Golden would just be 40 years old doing it for the Gators this year. And then if Dan Hurley were to break through and win a third title in 4 years, that really elevates him. There's only been 6 people win 3 or more national championships. If he already gets a third, you're talking about this dynasty here in a 4-year run for UConn, but certainly elevates Dan Hurley into the discussion as one of the best coaches of all time, winning a third this year. And then lastly, Coach Rick Pitino, he's still hanging around. St. John's is a top 10 team in college basketball this season. This is a guy that's already went to the NCAA tournament with 6 different teams, went to the Final Four with 3 different teams. If he can win the championship with a third different team, obviously he did it at Kentucky and Louisville. If he can take a 4th team to a Final Four and win a championship at St. John's, then, regardless of what you think about him and his, extracurricular activities, he would be hard to argue against him as the best coach of all time if he wins 3 titles at 3 different schools. So I just thought that all those different storylines were really interesting to follow this year because, certainly if you're betting one of those guys or the field wins it this year, you're going to take one of those guys, I think, even against the field. And while it's different for each one, it's going to be a really cool storyline if any of those 7 names win the championship this year. Arizona once again underrated by East Coast. Arizona's a top program, will be a championship threat this year. I was low on them in my preseason top 25. I'll admit that. I think I had them ranked like 17th or 18th. I had to submit that a couple weeks before the season. Pretty quickly realized, man, I was too low on Arizona. That's why I picked them to go to the Final Four. And then, man, they, kind of proved me right, at least in a 1-game setting against Florida. So I agree. I love this Florida team, and they are certainly a Final Four championship level contender. So you could throw Tommy Lloyd into this conversation I was just having. A few hot takes I threw out on the College Basketball Manifesto. I said that Michigan State makes a run to the Elite Eight, and then Coach Izzo retires after this season. I kind of feel like that one of the big names is probably going to move on from college basketball this season, so I just kind of took a swing with that one. I had McNeese running through the Southland Conference undefeated, and their coach actually going to where he was an assistant for a while and taking the LSU job after Coach Matt McMahon gets fired this season. I know I talked about High Point and some of the other teams that I thought could be long-time undefeated teams this year. I know Kent State was one of them. I think Yale has a chance to do something like that as well. So certainly some teams to follow there. But go check out that article on KentuckySportsRadio.com. And we'll wrap up today's show talking a little bit about Kentucky's opener against Nicholls. I was at Rupp Arena last night for that game. Obviously, the first half, I'm not sure, could have been much uglier. 2 of 16 from three-point range for Kentucky. Nicholls was held to just 15 points on 12% shooting, but Kentucky looked lethargic. They were slow offensively. They struggled to get into their stuff. They weren't executing the half-court offense the way we were used to seeing it last year, where it was so crisp and the passing and the cutting, the spacing all worked together so well. Really saw none of that on Monday night. The second half, the pace picked up. Kentucky did a much better job in transition. Denzel Aberdeen, Colin Chandler, Jasper Johnson all got going as playmakers. They were 5 of 11 from 3 in the second half. So you ended up still getting to a pretty good place, a 77-51 victory. Kentucky extended the lead in essentially every segment of the game. aside from the very last one, which they lost by 1 point. So they were in perfect control of the game. They extended their lead throughout. It just took a while to kind of make it look very good at all. But any one game should be taken with a grain of salt. You're still playing without your starting point guard in Jalen Lowe, and something I want to talk about with that. And I said it last year when you were missing Lamont Butler and guys like that, but no matter your depth, and I know people are going to talk about the $22 million roster and how Kentucky fans talk about the depth and all this kind of stuff. No matter your depth, not having your starting point guard, and not just any starting point guard, but a starting point guard that is expected to be an all SEC caliber type player, your offense isn't going to look as good. It's not supposed to look as good. So it's okay that Kentucky has some kinks to work out on the offensive end. You got to get Jalen Lowe back. You got to play at full strength for a while. And I think once you get that back, then you can really start to evaluate this team. But obviously the shooting woes now have lived through the blue-white scrimmage, a couple of exhibitions, and then certainly what we saw in the first half last night against Nichols. It is worrisome because I'm not overly sold on all of these guys as shooters. Cam Williams, and we have a comment here from Stuart Hall 2354. Are you worried about Cam Williams shooting? Seems like trying to get him sped up to his release as him rushing it. He does not look very comfortable offensively right now. Still passing it all right. I've actually been impressed with him defensively. I thought he was excellent defensively last year. Getting some guys to miss with his length around the basket. But, he's the one that, as a 41% shooter coming from Tulane, at least this guy's made threes at a relatively high college level. I think that he'll figure it out. Like, he's going to make open threes as the season goes on. I think Colin Chandler's going to do the same. I think Jasper Johnson is going to do the same. But some of these other guys, I think that Kentucky fans were leaning into a lot of improvements that we were just kind of expecting to be true. We can hear all the things we want to hear about Trent Noah being the best shooter on the team and how excellent he is. He was 33.3% in the games last year. So let's not act like this guy is some proven elite shooter. Now, do I think he can be a really good shooter? I think he's going to be a better shooter than he's shown so far in some of these live action. Yeah, I do. But I don't think that he's all of a sudden Kobe Bryant or even Jackson Robinson. He's going to certainly have to prove a lot before we, in my opinion, chalk him in as being a very good shooter for this team. Same would be some with Denzel Aberdeen. I mean, he's a guy that's on a pretty low volume as a 33.3% career three-point shooter. So I don't all of a sudden think he's going to be a star. I expect Jalen Lowe to shoot it better, but heck, he was not a very good shooter last year at Pittsburgh. I think Andrei Yelovich will eventually make some threes this year, but he wasn't exactly lighting the world on fire from three in the Adriatic League. It was like one make a game at 31, 32%. So I think you have a lot of below average to average shooters that kind of in our minds we were expecting to just become great, and that's not the way that it works. Now, do I think that they're obviously going to be better than what they showed against Nichols and then some of these preseason matchups as well? Yes. But do I think this is going to be a very good shooting team? I'm going to have to see it before I get there. And that's not throwing cold water on the season, because you can win a lot of games without being great from three-point range. And I'm not even saying that they won't eventually get there. They'll certainly have games where they're hot from beyond the arc. So it's a concern. I'm much, much more concerned about the free throw shooting at this point than I am the three-point shooting. But both of those things are worries at this point in the year. But, overall, I was happy with the second half and the way that Kentucky was able to finish that game, then turn around. We'll play Valparaiso on Friday as the final sort of tune-up before we have to go into the Yum Center and play Louisville on next Tuesday, a week from yesterday. We have another comment here from Dougie Hudson, 4124. What's up with the Tyron Stokes withdrawal from Notre Dame High School? So the only things I know about this are things I've read from Jacob Polachek and Jack Pilgrim on KS Board, part of KSR Plus. So go check that out if you aren't already signed up and subscribed. They have all the information there. Jacob Polachek's probably the number one leader in the country in terms of Tyron Stokes news. So I would recommend following him. But he was, I think, more or less asked to leave the school. It sounds like that over the course of, whether it's this year or beyond that, or even more recently, the last couple of weeks, There's been some disciplinary issues that involve issues with other students. I have no idea what those are. I have no idea the severity of them or the number of them. And, I don't want to overly speculate about, the behaviors of high school kids. But needless to say, I don't think it was going well from a social standpoint at Notre Dame High School out in California. And I think that there was then a maybe mutual at best agreement for him to look at other opportunities. Will those opportunities include enrolling early at the semester in college? I think that's on the table, but at least from initial reports, maybe leaning towards unlikely. What does this mean for Kentucky's recruitment of him? I have no idea. Honestly, I don't think it's going to change much. If I had to guess, he'll end up enrolling at overtime elite or like one of the EYBL Scholastic prep school type places or something like that. That's kind of playing out the season, graduating and matriculating on to college as he would have otherwise. Obviously, yeah, when you're the number one player in the country and a week before basketball season, you're no longer at your high school. It's something to talk about. But in terms of how it affects kind of the longevity of his recruiting process, what it means for Kentucky or Kansas or Oregon, I'm not sure it's going to necessarily play some huge factor, unless something serious comes out that, would be like, hands off. But at least right now, I have no idea what any of those things might be. And I certainly don't want to speculate on that front. But yes, there is big news today that Tyron Stokes is no longer at Notre Dame High School. He's kind of looking for a new home, so to speak, which is certainly a story when you're the number one player in the country and it's this time of year. But tonight, I'm going to be watching the Indiana Hoosiers. I believe LSU plays, Mississippi State plays, Creighton plays, Marquette plays. So a few good teams on that. Butler plays Southern Indiana, but I'll probably be sitting down to watch the Hoosiers later this evening. Then we'll kind of get through the rest of this week, and things will continue to heat up. Like I said, we're less than a week away now from Kentucky at Louisville. A bunch of good games coming next week. This will continue to be one of the best places to live throughout college basketball season. I'll have more Chalk Talk content on this page. This show, my normal podcast, will have some guests on throughout the season as well. So staying up to date with the college basketball season, subscribe to the Brandon Ramsey College Basketball Show if you want to do so, and leave this video a like. Also follow me on Twitter at BRamseyKSR. I have tons of daily tweets about college basketball there, so please go do that as well. Thank you all for being here watching live for today's episode of All Fired Up, and hope you enjoy the start of the 2025-2026 college basketball season. Thanks for listening.